The first thing people noticed was how quiet she was. Not quiet like afraid. Quiet like granite. She stood at the edge of the downtown plaza, one hand resting on a worn cane, the other holding a small folder tight to her coat as if the wind might steal it. A thin gray scarf framed her face. Her skin was deep brown, the color of brewed coffee left to cool. Her hair, silver and close-cropped, caught the winter sun like a crown that refused to glitter for anyone. The building behind her was all glass and steel, the kind of place that reflected the city back at itself as if it were too important to touch the real world. Security badges moved through revolving doors like fish in a tank. Cameras sat in black domes overhead, watching and blinking without blinking. And in front of her, a uniformed officer stepped into her path with the practiced impatience of someone used to bodies moving when he said move. He said, voice loud enough for everyone around to hear, "You can't be here." She didn't flinch. "I'm not causing trouble." Another officer arrived. Then a third, like a tide that didn't bother to hide what it was doing. A few people slowed down. A couple stopped. Someone in a suit pretended not to look while looking. A woman pushing a stroller paused, eyes going wide. A delivery driver leaned against his cart and muttered something under his breath. Phones started to appear. A teenage boy lifted his camera like he was raising a torch. A young woman with long braids turned her screen toward the scene and whispered, "You'll look at this." The first officer angled his body so he was broader than necessary. He pointed at a small sign near the steps, "Authorized personnel only." "This is private property," he said. "We've had complaints." The old woman's gaze moved from the sign to his face with a steadiness that made him talk faster. "I'm waiting for someone," she said. The second officer, taller, younger, already irritated, snorted. "Waiting for who?" She didn't offer a name. The first officer said again, drawing the word out like a leash. "We've asked you to leave. You're trespassing now. If you don't comply, we'll have to escort you off the premises." She lifted her chin. The wind pressed her coat against her frame and revealed how small she was, how easily the world could pretend she wasn't worth noticing until it decided she was worth removing. "I belong where I stand," she said softly. That sentence landed wrong in the officer's ears, like a challenge instead of a truth. The crowd tightened. A man in a puffy jacket called out, "Leave her alone. She ain't doing nothing." A woman near the front whispered, "This is about to be ugly." Someone else said, "Yo, I'm live." A tiny red dot glowed on multiple screens. The young officer's hand hovered near his belt. "Last warning." The old woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She didn't perform softness to make herself safe. "I'm not resisting," she said, "but I'm not leaving." The first officer's jaw flexed. "Okay, that's it." They moved. Two hands grabbed her arm. The cane skittered on the stone and clattered away like a bone thrown aside. Her folders slipped, papers fluttering out, a few landing in a slush puddle. "Hey!" someone shouted. Her shoulder dipped as they pulled, and for the first time a sound escaped her. Not a scream, not a cry, just a sharp breath, like a door closing on air. "Get your hands off her," the delivery driver yelled, stepping forward. "Back up," an officer snapped. The phones surged closer. The old woman's knees buckled under the sudden force. One officer swept her legs. Another pushed down between her shoulder blades. She hit the ground hard. A gasp rippled through the crowd like a wave slamming ashore. The camera on one livestream caught her cheek pressed to wet stone, her face turned sideways, eyes open, calm even there. Her hands were pinned behind her back. A gloved knee settled into her upper spine. "Stop resisting," the young officer barked, loud enough to justify what everyone could see. "I'm not," she said, voice strained but steady. Her scarf had slipped. Her silver hair was damp at the edge. She blinked once, slow. Someone in the crowd sobbed, "Oh my God." Another voice, "This is the kind of stuff that goes viral." The first officer leaned down close to her ear, his mouth tight. "You want to make this hard? We can make it hard." The old woman inhaled, as if she were measuring her breath like it mattered. Then, with her cheeks still on the cold stone, she said the sentence that sliced through the noise. "I was a U.S. Army colonel." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply placed in the air like a badge on a table. For half a second, nothing changed. Then something did. The pressure of the knee faltered. The young officer's eyes flicked, sharp and uncertain. The first officer's face tightened in a way that wasn't anger anymore. A bystander's livestream chat began exploding, words and emojis flying so fast the screen blurred. "Colonel." "Wait, what?" "They done messed up." The old woman's gaze stayed forward, unbroken. And somewhere behind the glass doors of the building, a security manager who had been watching on a monitor suddenly went pale, lifted a phone, and whispered, "Oh no, not her." The scene held its breath, because everyone could feel it. Whatever story they thought they were watching was about to flip. That morning, the city had woken up mean. Gray clouds hung low, pressing the light thin. Salt trucks had left white scars along the curbs. People hurried with shoulders hunched, eyes narrowed against cold wind and colder schedules. In a modest brick house on the city's south side, Corinne Avery stood at her kitchen sink with her hands under warm water, letting feeling return to her fingers. Her wedding ring was gone, had been for years, but the pale line remained like a memory the skin refused to forget. On the counter lay a neatly pressed coat, a scarf folded with military precision, and a small folder clipped shut. Beside it sat a metal case, old, dark green, edges worn. She didn't open it every day, only on days that asked for her whole spine. She turned off the faucet and dried her hands carefully. Then she looked at the clock. 7:10 a.m. Right on time. Her home was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater and the soft ticking of a wall clock she'd owned since 1989. On the refrigerator were photos, a young man in fatigues grinning beside a helicopter, a little girl holding a science fair ribbon, a group photo of women in uniform, arms linked, faces bright. Corinne touched the corner of the group photo like it was a prayer. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She let it ring twice before answering. "Yes," she said. A man's voice, polite and careful. "Ms. Avery, this is Daniel Wynn from Wynn & Associates. We spoke last week about the property transfer." Corinne sank into a chair, posture straight even while sitting. "Yes, I remember. We've confirmed the meeting time," he said. 9:30, at the headquarters building downtown. "I'll be there with the documents." Corinne's eyes drifted to the folder on the counter. "I'll be there." There was a pause. "Ms. Avery, I want to prepare you. There may be resistance. The current executive team is not thrilled about the audit." "I'm aware," Corinne said. Another pause, like he wanted to say something he wasn't sure she'd accept. "Do you have someone coming with you?" Corinne smiled once. Small. "I've walked into worse rooms alone." When she hung up, she didn't move for a moment. She listened to the house. She listened to herself. Her knees ached these days. Her back carried weather like an extra coat. She had learned to live with pain the way she had learned to live with being underestimated, like background noise you refuse to let become the soundtrack. She stood and went to the bedroom. In the closet, behind winter sweaters and an old set of dress blues sealed in plastic, was a showbox. Inside, letters. Some folded, some still in envelopes, a few stained at the corners with time. One was addressed in a child's handwriting. "Grandma C., I'm proud of you." Corinne let her thumb rest over that sentence. Then she closed the box. Gentle. She dressed with deliberation. Black slacks, sensible shoes, a coat thick enough to cut the wind. Her scarf, the color of deep wine, tucked just so. She clipped her folder under her arm. On the way out, she paused in the hallway where a framed certificate hung. United States Army, Honorable Service Corinne Avery, Colonel, Ret. She didn't look at it like a trophy. She looked at it like a chapter. "All right," she said to the empty hallway, like she was speaking to an old friend. "Let's do this." Outside, her neighbor Mrs. Hargrove was struggling with groceries. Corinne crossed the yard without hesitation, cane tapping lightly. "Let me." "Oh no, baby," Mrs. Hargrove said, cheeks red from cold. "You don't have to." "I know I don't," Corinne replied. "That's why it counts." They carried the bags together. Mrs. Hargrove eyed Corinne's folder. "Big day." Corinne nodded. "Big enough." Mrs. Hargrove leaned closer, voice dropping. You be careful downtown. Folks act funny when they see us standing somewhere like we own the air. Corinne's expression softened. I remember. She did remember. She remembered being 19, stepping off a bus at Fort Jackson with hair pulled tight and a spine trying to learn how to be still. She remembered the first time a sergeant looked at her and saw only two things, her skin and her gender. You sure you're in the right line? He'd asked, like the idea of her choosing this life was a clerical error. She remembered the years that followed, learning to shoot, learning to lead, learning to swallow rage until it became strategy. She remembered the desert sun and the way it made everyone look the same color when it hit hard enough. She remembered losing friends. She remembered earning respect the slow way. She remembered standing in front of a room full of men who'd never been corrected by a black woman in their lives and saying, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the right way. Pick. They'd pick the right way. Eventually. Corinne's career didn't make her famous. It made her capable, and that capability followed her into retirement like a shadow. When her husband died, she kept the house. When her daughter moved out of state, Corinne stayed. When the community center needed volunteers, Corinne showed up. When a young veteran down the block spiraled into silence, Corinne sat with him on the porch until words returned. Quiet strength wasn't a slogan for her. It was a habit. So when a letter arrived 6 months ago, stamped with a corporate seal and written in language designed to intimidate, Corinne read it like she read mission briefs. Slowly, carefully, refusing to be rushed. Notice of termination, lease and community program access. They were shutting down the Veterans Clinic on the South Side. The one she helped run twice a week. The one that kept people from falling through cracks the city pretended were invisible. The letter cited restructuring, security concerns, liability. Corinne did what she always did. She asked questions. Those questions led her to old documents her late husband had left behind, things he'd never thought mattered. A deed, a trust, shares, a long-ago agreement with a company that had started small and then grown into the glass and steel giant downtown. Corinne read, cross-referenced, made calls, requested records. When people tried to dismiss her, she didn't argue. She simply returned with more proof. Eventually, a lawyer called her back with a voice that sounded like someone stepping onto thin ice. Ms. Avery, he'd said, do you understand what you have? Corinne had stared at the papers, the way names and numbers lined up like soldiers. Yes, she'd said. I do now. That morning, as she walked to the bus stop, she felt the weight of that understanding in her folder. Not like power, like responsibility. At the stop, a young man in a hoodie offered her his seat when the bus arrived crowded. Corinne shook her head. Save it for someone who needs it more. He blinked. You need it. Corinne smiled. Son, I've carried heavier things than my own bones. He didn't know what to do with that, so he just nodded, respectful without understanding why. As the bus rolled toward downtown, Corinne watched neighborhoods shift through the window. Brick giving way to glass, murals giving way to billboards, people giving way to reflections. She touched her folder. Inside were documents that could force a reckoning. Inside was the reason she'd be standing in that plaza soon. Inside was the truth nobody bothered to guess. Corinne Avery wasn't there to beg. She was there to take back what was being stolen. And she already knew the kind of resistance power offers when it recognizes your face doesn't match its favorite story. The stone beneath Corinne's cheek was cold enough to bite. The officer's knee had eased, just a fraction, but it still pinned her like a period at the end of a sentence someone else had written. You hear that? The young officer murmured to his partner, doubt creeping into his voice like water under a door. She said she was a colonel. The first officer didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the crowd, at the phones, at the growing ring of witnesses. Anybody can say anything. He finally snapped, but it came out thinner than he wanted. Corinne breathed carefully. I didn't say it to impress you, she said. I said it because you're making a mistake. A man's voice in the crowd rose above the rest. Let her up. You all got her face in the date. Another person shouted, this is live on TikTok. A woman near the front turned her screen around. It's already got like 10,000 watching. 10,000. Then 15. Then 20. Comments poured in like rain. This is sick. Why they always do this? Grandma didn't even move. Someone call a lawyer. Drop the location. Corinne felt the vibration of other people's outrage like heat in the air. She didn't feed it. She didn't perform pain. She simply existed, steady and unyielding, refusing to be reduced to a spectacle even as the world tried to turn her into one. The young officer barked again, louder, for the cameras. Stop resisting. Corinne's voice stayed low. You're saying that for them, she said, and her eyes flicked toward the phones, not because it's true. That landed. The crowd reacted, murmurs, a few sharp laughs edged with anger. The first officer's face reddened. You're being detained for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Disorderly, Corinne repeated. For standing. We told you to leave. I told you I belong here. The young officer leaned down, close enough that Corinne smelled mint gum and adrenaline. Who are you waiting for? He demanded. Corinne looked at him, really looked, and in that look was something he couldn't categorize. Not fear, not defiance. Something like assessment. Like he was a junior lieutenant who'd forgotten his map. I'm waiting for the truth to catch up, she said. The first officer scoffed. Okay, cute. Put cuffs on her. The metal clicked. A roar went up from the crowd. No. Are you serious? This is elder abuse. A man in a suit stepped forward, hand raised. Officers, perhaps we can de-escalate. So, step back. The first officer snapped, and the man retreated immediately, cheeks flushing with cowardice. Corinne felt the cuff tighten around her wrist. Old bones protested. Pain sparked bright and quick. Her jaw clenched once. She didn't cry out. The livestream zoomed in on her face. Someone narrating on another phone whispered, "Look at her. She ain't even panicking." The crowd's energy shifted from shock to something sharper. Protective. Righteous. Dangerous. Get off her, someone yelled again, and this time a few bodies surged forward. Officers stiffened. Hands went to batons. The line between incident and riot began to thin. A security guard from the building pushed through the doors, eyes darting. He spoke quickly to one of the officers, his lips moving like he was trying to swallow a disaster. The first officer shook his head, dismissive. We've got it. The guard's face twisted. No, you don't. Back inside, the officer ordered. The guard hesitated, then retreated, visibly shaken. Corinne watched the exchange, then closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to a radio only she could hear. When she opened them, she said, "Officer, what is your name?" The first officer blinked. "That's not." "What is your name?" she asked again, calm as sunrise. He hesitated. The crowd leaned in. Phones captured the moment his confidence wavered. "Officer Grant," he snapped finally. Corinne nodded like she'd received a report. "Officer Grant," she said, "I need you to make a decision right now. One that you can live with." He scoffed, but his eyes flickered. The young officer muttered, "She's trying to play you." Corinne's voice stayed even. "I'm trying to save you." The crowd went silent for a beat, as if the whole plaza had inhaled together. Then, over the officers' radios, static cracked. A voice came through, urgent and clipped. "Unit on scene at Wind Tower. Confirms subject identity." "Repeat. Confirms subject identity." Officer Grant's head lifted. His hand went to his radio. "Dispatch. Subject is an elderly female refusing to leave private property. Claims military." The radio voice cut him off. "Stand by. We have a caller from corporate security insisting immediate release." "Stand by." Corporate security. Officer Grant's gaze snapped to the building. The crowd sensed the shift and tightened further, like wolves smelling weakness. Corinne's tone remained unchanged. "If you let pride drive the next 60 seconds, she said, you will remember them for the rest of your life." Officer Grant's throat bubbed. "I don't know who you think you are." Corinne didn't raise her voice, but when she spoke, it carried like a command across a battlefield. "I know exactly who I am." The livestream chat erupted again. "Oh, she cooking." Grandma said, "Stand up straight." This about to turn. Officer Grant looked at her papers scattered on the ground, one page half soaked in slush. He didn't know what they were, but something about the way she held herself made him wonder if those papers held more authority than his badge ever would. His radio crackled again. "Officer Grant," dispatch said, voice different now, more careful, like someone realizing the wrong person had been grabbed. "Supervisor en route. Do not transport. Repeat, do not transport." Officer Grant's lips parted. The young officer whispered, "What's going on?" Officer Grant didn't answer. He stared at Corinne like he was seeing a door where he thought there was a wall. And behind the glass doors, inside the building, more security personnel appeared. Too many, too fast. A man in a suit sprinted across the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, face slick with panic. The plaza held in suspense, tension humming so loud it felt like electricity. Corinne inhaled slowly. Then she said, "For the cameras, for the crowd, for the officers, for the building that had tried to erase her." "Now," she murmured, "watch what happens when the truth walks in wearing my name." A black sedan slid up to the curb like it belonged to the moment. It stopped with a precision that felt rehearsed. The rear door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s, sharp suit, no coat despite the cold. His hair was neatly cut, his face drawn tight with urgency. He looked around, saw the crowd, saw the phones, saw Corinne on the ground, and his expression collapsed into something close to horror. "Ms. Avery," he said, voice cracking on the honorific. He moved quickly, too quickly for a man who lived in boardrooms. He pushed past a security guard, past a stunned bystander, straight toward the officers. Officer Grant straightened. "Sir, you can't." The man held up a hand, trembling slightly. No, you don't understand. You need to get off her right now." Officer Grant's posture hardened on reflex. "Sir, she's being detained." The man's eyes flashed. "That woman is Colonel Corinne Avery, retired United States Army. Silver Star, Bronze Star, 2 deployments. She is also," his voice dropped, then rose again so the phones could catch it, "the majority voting trustee for the Avery Family Trust, which holds controlling interest in Wynn Integrated Services." The plaza went so quiet you could hear someone's livestream buffering. Phones captured faces frozen mid-expression. A teenager's mouth hung open. A woman whispered, "Controlling interest." The man swallowed hard. "This is her building," he finished, "and you are assaulting her on camera." Silence detonated. It wasn't a sound. It was the absence of every sound. Officer Grant's hand twitched at his radio like it could pull him out of reality. The young officer's face drained of color. "That's not," he began, then stopped because the man in the suit was already pulling out documents, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped them. "I'm Daniel Wynn," he said, voice tight. "Company counsel. These are the papers she came to sign. She called this meeting. She requested the audit. And she authorized." His eyes flicked to the phones again, like he knew the public needed to hear it. "A full investigation into discriminatory enforcement practices on this property." Officer Grant blinked rapidly, as if blinking could undo the last 5 minutes. Corinne, still on the ground, turned her face slightly. Her eyes found Daniel Wynn. "Morning," she said. Daniel's voice went soft, thick with remorse. "I'm so sorry." Officer Grant's knee lifted instantly, like it had touched a live wire. The young officer fumbled with the cuffs. Take them off," Daniel snapped. Officer Grant stammered. "We didn't know." Corinne's voice cut through, quiet and absolute. "You didn't ask." The cuffs clicked open. A sound rose from the crowd, half cheer, half grief. Corinne pushed herself up slowly, refusing offered hands at first. Then she accepted Daniel's arm, not because she needed saving, but because she was wise enough to let the world witness dignity being returned. As she stood, her cane was retrieved by a bystander who held it out with both hands like an offering. Corinne accepted it with a nod. Her folder lay open on the ground. Daniel crouched to pick up the papers, wiping slush off the corner of one page with his sleeve, face burning with shame. The live stream zoomed in on Corinne's face. People expected triumph. They expected anger. They expected a speech that cut like a knife. What they got was something harder to ignore. "Calm." Corinne looked at Officer Grant and the young officer. They looked smaller now, not because they had changed height, but because the story they were telling themselves, "We're in control," had been ripped away in front of an audience. Officer Grant swallowed. He began, voice hoarse, "I apologize. We—" Corinne lifted a hand. "Not to forgive. Not to punish. To pause." "Officer Grant," she said, and her voice carried clearly, cleanly, into every phone microphone. "You put a knee on my back and called me disorderly for existing in public space." His face tightened. Corinne continued, "If I had not been who I am on paper, what would you have done next?" He couldn't answer. The crowd didn't help him. The silence held him accountable. Daniel Wynn stepped forward, addressing the officers, the crowd, the cameras. "We're going inside," he said, "and this will be handled." Corinne glanced toward the building's glass doors. Her reflection stared back, an old black woman with a cane, a damp scarf, and eyes that had seen war and still refused to bow. She took one step forward, then another. Behind her, the crowd parted like water, phones following. And Officer Grant, standing rigid with his jaw clenched, realized something too late. The reversal wasn't just that she had rank. It was that she had receipts. The video hit the internet before Corinne reached the lobby. It was clipped, captioned, reposted, stitched with commentary, slowed down at the moment her words landed. "I was a U.S. Army colonel." In one version, someone added dramatic music. In another, someone added text. They thought she was nobody. She owned the place. But the most widely shared version didn't add anything. It didn't need to. It simply showed a small elderly woman pinned to stone, officers shouting commands, a crowd pleading, her calm face, and then the shift when the truth walked in on two legs wearing a suit and fear. By noon, hashtags were trending. By afternoon, news vans parked near the plaza. By evening, the police department released a statement full of neutral language that sounded like a person trying to apologize without admitting fault. An incident occurred, officers responded, an investigation is underway. People didn't accept it. Not this time. Because the footage was too clear. Because Corinne's stillness made the violence look even louder. And because the reversal exposed something the public had always suspected, that respect was often granted only when power could be proven on paper. Inside Wynn Integrated Services headquarters, the atmosphere shifted from corporate confidence to crisis management in less than an hour. Executives who had pushed for the clinic shutdown suddenly discovered empathy. Managers who had dismissed complaints suddenly requested meetings. The head of property security, who had made the call that a suspicious woman was loitering, was placed on administrative leave before lunchtime. Daniel Wynn sat in a conference room with Corinne and two outside attorneys she'd brought in quietly weeks ago. He looked like a man watching his own career hang over a ledge. Corinne placed a folder on the table and opened it. Inside were audited reports, email chains, contracts, surveillance logs, security incident reports flagged with patterns, names, dates, races, outcomes. A map of enforcement like a heat signature. She slid a page across the table. Daniel's eyes widened. "You all ready?" "I didn't wake up yesterday," Corinne said. The CEO arrived, smiling too hard, suit too bright, eyes too nervous. "Ms. Avery," he began warmly, "I want to personally express how deeply sorry we are that." Corinne lifted her eyes. "Stop," she said. Not loud, just firm. The CEO's smile faltered. Corinne tapped the paper. "You weren't sorry when your people wrote letters shutting down a clinic that kept veterans alive. You weren't sorry when your security called the police instead of asking a question. Don't become sorry now because you're afraid." The CEO's mouth opened, then closed. Outside the building, reporters gathered. Someone shouted questions through the glass. "Ms. Avery, are you pressing charges? Will the officers be fired? Is it true you control the company?" The police supervisor arrived and requested to speak with Corinne privately. Corinne refused. "Nothing about what happened to me was private," she said. "We'll speak where everyone can hear." The supervisor's face tightened, but he nodded, because refusing would look worse. By the next morning, Officer Grant and the young officer were placed on leave pending investigation. Body camera footage was demanded by the public and subpoenaed by Corinne's attorneys. The city council called an emergency meeting about policing and private security contracts. When integrated stock dipped hard as investors reacted to the scandal and the looming audit, numbers slipping on screens like spilled ink. Employees at the company started sharing their own stories. A black janitor posted a video. "They called security on me last month because I used the main elevator." A Latina receptionist wrote, "They told me to watch certain people like we're still in 1950. A veteran wrote, "That clinic saved my life. They tried to close it like it was nothing." The internet did what it always did, amplified pain. But this time it also amplified evidence. And because Corinne had planned, documented, and waited, the consequences didn't float away on a wave of outrage. They landed hard. Lawsuits followed, not just from Corinne, but from others whose stories matched her collected patterns. The company's board demanded resignations. The head of security was fired. A vice president who had pushed the clinic closure was forced out quietly, then loudly, when internal emails leaked showing he'd called the clinic a liability magnet. The police department faced a federal inquiry into use of force and bias patterns tied to private property calls. And through all of it, Corinne moved like someone who had learned long ago that justice required more than anger. It required stamina. It required discipline. It required the willingness to keep walking forward even when your knees hurt. 2 days after the incident, Corinne stood at a press conference in the same plaza. They'd set up a small podium. Microphones bristled like in tennis. Behind her, community members gathered, veterans in worn caps, nurses from the clinic, teenagers with phones, elders with folded arms. News cameras framed Corinne tight. She wore the same coat, the same scarf, the same calm. Officer Grant stood off to the side with other officers, faces rigid. The police chief hovered nearby, eyes careful. Daniel Wynn stood behind Corinne, looking like a man who had lost sleep and found humility. Corinne stepped to the microphone. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't perform pain. She simply spoke. "I want to say something," she began, voice steady, "to the people who watched me get forced to the ground." The plaza quieted. To the people who recorded it, she continued, "Thank you. Not because I enjoy being seen hurt, but because cameras make it harder to lie." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Corinne's eyes swept across faces, young, old, angry, afraid. "I am not here to destroy anyone," she said. "I am here to correct something." She paused. Let the words settle. "When I was a young lieutenant," she said, "an older soldier taught me this. Power is not the ability to make someone smaller. Power is the ability to make the situation right even when you could get away with leaving it wrong." Phones rose higher. She leaned slightly into the microphone. "Some of you saw an old black woman on the ground and thought, that could be my mother. That could be my grandmother. That could be me in 40 years. Her voice softened. "You were right." She let that breathe, then continued. "And some people saw me and thought, she doesn't belong here." Corinne's gaze turned toward the building. "The truth is, I belonged here long before anyone recognized my name. I belonged here because I am a human being. I belonged here because I was standing peacefully in public. I belonged here because dignity is not something you earn by proving your resume." Her voice sharpened, not with anger, but with clarity. "If the only thing that made you pause was the title colonel, then what you respect is not me. It's power." The crowd went still. Corinne lifted her chin. "And that's the lesson," she said, "I want us to take home." She pointed, not accusingly, but precisely, toward the officers. "I don't want you to fear consequences only when cameras are on," she said. "I want you to learn conscience even when nobody is watching." Then she turned back to the people. "To everyone who has ever been told they don't belong," she said, voice warm now, "I want you to remember something. You do not have to become extraordinary to deserve ordinary respect." A few people wiped tears. Corinne's eyes glistened but did not spill. "I am proud of my service," she said. "I'm proud of the title I earned. But I am more proud that I can stand here and tell you, even without any of that, I should have been safe." She paused again, long enough for the cameras to capture the stillness. Accountability is not revenge, Corinne said. Accountability is love for the future. It is saying, we will not keep passing this harm down like an inheritance. She took a breath. So here's what will happen, she said. There will be investigations. There will be training. There will be new policies. There will be people who lose positions they should never have used to hurt others. And there will be a clinic on the South Side that stays open, because veterans are not liabilities. They are lives. She stepped back from the microphone slightly, then leaned in for the last lines, voice low and unforgettable. Before you decide someone doesn't belong, she said, ask yourself a question. Are you protecting safety, or are you protecting your comfort? She nodded once, and the nod felt like a final stamp. That's all. 7 months passed. Spring softened the city. The plaza looked different now. Not because the stone changed, but because memory lived there like a shadow that refused to fade. A small bronze plaque had been installed near the steps. Not a monument, not a victory statue, just a marker. In this place, we commit to dignity for all. No one must prove their worth to deserve respect. The clinic on the South Side not only stayed open, it expanded. A new wing was funded through a settlement that, when integrated, could not spin as generosity because the public had watched the pressure that forced it. The wing offered mental health services, job placement support, and legal aid for veterans navigating benefits. On the day the new wing opened, Corinne stood in the doorway and watched people walk in with cautious hope. A young veteran who once couldn't meet anyone's eyes hugged her hard enough that Corinne's breath caught. "Thank you," he whispered. Corinne patted his shoulder. "Stay," she said. "Let people help you stay." The police department underwent changes that were both real and imperfect. Policy updates, mandatory body camera activation on private security calls, revised use of force standards for elderly civilians. Some officers resented it. Some welcomed it. Officer Grant didn't return to the same assignment. He was suspended, then reassigned, then required to attend a restorative accountability program that involved facing community members without a badge to hide behind. He showed up the first day looking furious and humiliated. Then he heard a mother speak about teaching her son how to keep his hands visible and his voice soft. He heard a veteran speak about not feeling safe in the country he served. He heard an elder talk about the exhaustion of being treated like a threat in your own skin. Officer Grant didn't cry, but his jaw loosened. His eyes stopped darting. He began, slowly, to look like a man realizing the story he'd believed about himself wasn't complete. The young officer resigned. He wrote a statement later about wanting to pursue other opportunities, but people in the community knew the truth. Some people don't want the work of changing. They only want the comfort of being right. When integrated services changed too, again, real and imperfect. A new board chair was appointed after the previous one stepped down under pressure. A community oversight committee was formed, with actual power, not symbolic seats. Private security contracts were rewritten to reduce police calls and increase de-escalation requirements. But the biggest change wasn't corporate. It was cultural. Employees stopped whispering about who belongs. Because Corinne made belonging non-negotiable. She didn't do it with screaming. She did it with policy, paperwork, and presence. On a warm afternoon in early September, Corinne sat on the clinic's porch in a rocking chair donated by a local carpenter. Kids played across the street. The air smelled like cut grass and barbecue smoke. Daniel, when approached slowly, hands in his pockets like a man trying not to disturb peace. Corinne looked up. "You're walking like you're approaching a battlefield," she observed. Daniel let out a breathy laugh. "Feels like I'm always one mistake away from causing damage." Corinne nodded. "That awareness is a start." He held out a folder. "The final audit results," he said, "and the board voted unanimously. We're restoring the community program access permanently. It's in writing." Corinne took the folder, opened it, scanned the page. Her eyes moved like they were reading a mission report. She closed it and handed it back. "Good," she said. Daniel swallowed. "I still think about that day," he admitted. "How close we were to." "To what?" Corinne asked. "To the world watching a different ending," Daniel said quietly. Corinne's gaze drifted toward the street where a teenager rode a bike with no fear in his body. "Yes," she said. We were close. Daniel hesitated. Can I ask you something? Corinne tilted her head. Why were you so calm? Daniel asked. When they put you on the ground, how did you not break? Corinne's eyes softened. I did break, she said. A long time ago. In pieces. Quiet pieces. And then I learned how to put myself back together. Daniel's throat worked. How? Corinne looked at him like she was choosing words carefully because they mattered. I stopped asking the world for permission to be human, she said. And I stopped giving people the power to define me with their fear. She rocked gently, chair creaking. Also, she added, almost with a smile, I've been through war. A plaza full of loud ignorance is not the worst noise I've heard. Daniel nodded, eyes down. Will you ever forgive them? Corinne's expression stayed calm. Forgiveness is not a gift I hand out like candy, she said. But I leave room for people to become better than their worst moment. She looked at him, steady. That room, she said, is not free. They have to build it. Daniel nodded again, and this time it looked like he understood. As he walked away, Corinne watched him go. Then she looked at the clinic doors. People kept coming in. People kept getting help. People kept staying alive. And Corinne, retired colonel, quiet hurricane, continued her purpose, not as a legend on the internet, but as a woman in a neighborhood doing the work that made legends unnecessary. That video still exists online. You can still watch the moment a crowd gathered. The moment authority escalated. The moment an elderly black woman was forced to the ground for refusing to shrink. And the moment everything changed when the world learned she had a title powerful enough to make people suddenly care. But here's the question that lingers long after the clip ends. If she hadn't been a colonel, would you still believe she deserved to stand there in peace? And if the answer isn't an immediate, effortless yes, what does that reveal about the way you decide who belongs? What would change in your world if you treated dignity like a right, not a reward?